Hello everyone. Today I wanted to showcase something that is, well, a little bit disappointing, to be honest, but, well, it's already implemented. So we'll have to make do with it. It's basically the force fields for Magic map making. So, at first I thought that force fields were probably things that would, apply force physics on entities, including the player, such as the thing that is pouring out some wind in the Arlie map, or Arlie, or however the fuck is pronounced. The DLC where you go fight Cthulhu in The Stars Are Left, right? And, you know, those things that there's like a little passage that you got to go through, and there's like wind coming out, and if you don't put on the stone armor, you basically get pushed by the wind and you die falling to the pit, right? Well, uh, as you may already be seeing on the screen, that's not the case. These things right here, those invisible platforms that are actually in the exact same map, are the actual thing that force fields represent. So as you can see, I can walk over them. They are floating on top of the map, and they have this ripple effect when I step over them. So yeah, it's, well, kind of hard to see. They actually suck a lot in my opinion. It's not that they are hard to go through in game, because you can use just fire or cold or whatever, and it becomes very clear where the ripple effect is located, right? But personally, I just thought that this would have been implemented under the hood using regular mesh with some kind of additive effect or something, right? Rather than a deferred effect. But no, they are their own type of entity. Well, entity, thing that is located in the level geometry. And indeed, they can only be located within static level parts. And, well, down here you can see there's another cube that I added with a whole other thing. And, well, they aren't great, but they aren't bad either, because they've got a few cool properties. The first one is that even if you touch them by the side, because, the only time we see them in the game is like this platform up here, right? Well, if you touch them by the side, they also have this ripple effect. So that means we can do plenty of interesting things using these ripple thingies. And if we touch them from the other side, the ripple actually reaches throughout all of these faces like that. So it's pretty cool. I mean, it's not the best thing. I'm kind of sad that they aren't what I expected them to be. I'm a little bit disappointed. But, I mean, look at this thing, right? This could give for a very interesting kind of effect. And you can actually customize them plenty. But to be honest, I don't really think there's much point in customizing them all that much, considering how things work, right? And how the visual effect isn't going to be all that different. But yeah. Also, I'm going to minimize the game real quick and come back. And okay, it worked. But these things, for some reason, make the game a whole lot more unstable and very prone to crashing. So that's part of the reason why the Stars Are Left DLC, the last map, is so prone to crashing, because a lot of these things seem to be pretty hell-fast. Actually, my computer is kind of struggling right now. I don't know if you're hearing it, and it's not a bad computer. It's pretty beefy by today's standards. I mean, it's not good by today's standards, actually, but if you think about the time in which MagickCow came out, it's a fucking supercomputer compared to it, yet it's struggling. Why? Because these things consume a lot of memory, and C# is garbage collected, but the garbage collector can't keep up with the fucking resource intensity of these things, right? So I don't know under the hood what the fuck they are doing exactly to be this resource intensive, but it is what it is, right? So if we quit, we can go over and I don't know why I pressed the start accidentally again. Fuck me. Anyway, whatever. I'll just leave this loading up or quit it. What I want is to shut down the game, because I want to show the text editor so that we can see what is going on under the hood. So right here we've got this JSON file, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is this thing right here, which is a copy paste of a force field from the base game. It's not the one that I generated, but it's still a force field that can work. So let me correct this JSON file first so that we can get the correct brace and closing stuff to make it easier to read through the file. And here we go. So basically in the primary files and stuff, we got a field called num force fields and a force field array property, and within it we got all of the different force fields that are located in the map. And force fields can only be found within static level parts. They cannot be in the animated level parts, so you cannot make force fields that move, but you could theoretically make an animated level part that moves and has a very similar effect to it. I bet. I'm not sure, but we probably can apply some kind of additive effect that has a very similar effect, but probably we cannot replicate the ripple thing, right? So that's probably why force fields are their own entity thing, because they have their own kind of geometry category, because they have those ripples when you touch them and walk around them, right? So probably that effect requires some extra computing power, which might be what's actually making them so slow. So yeah, not slow, but rather, you know, expensive to use during runtime. It has a field for color, which from what I found in the literal only instance within the game where they spawn, it's 000. So I have no idea what they do. We could probably toy around with tinting them, and maybe we could actually have, force fields that are yellow or something like that, right? It could be really cool to have a red force field, for instance, right? You could have some very special kind of maps with that. We could have Duel of the Fates from Star Wars in MagickCow suddenly. Sadly, you cannot move them, so you couldn't exactly replicate the opening barriers, I guess. But yeah, you get what I mean. The width, I have no idea what it does, but we'll figure it out. Like, it's got alpha power, alpha fall off, max radius, ripple, distortion, right? So these things right here, I assume they are the radius and the distortion for the ripple effects and map distortion values. And there's something curious, because there's one saying vertex color enable, and I don't really think it's even used, because the only instance that exists within this buffer right here, I actually did a test before and I think I closed it, but if you pick the buffer and reinterpret it in C, right, and then print out all of the values, you will realize that every single color property is actually always 1111 or 1110, which means that the only value that changes is the alpha, and it's either 0 or 1, and everything else is 1.0, right? So I don't really know what the color does. In my case, I actually am reusing the code from my regular mesh generation, so that means that rather than, having a color property, I'm having a position, normal, tangent, and UVs, right? So, which I guess it's kind of dumb because it doesn't really use them, but it works fine. So personally, I think that vertex colors literally do absolutely fucking nothing to it. I would have to check the code, but I have not seen a visual difference between my mesh and the ones in the game. So personally, I think that the vertex color enable either doesn't work and it's a half-baked feature that they didn't finish implementing, or maybe it does do something and they just didn't use it for some reason. Maybe it's prone to crashing or something. We can experiment with it over time, right? Basically, here's the declaration for the vertices. In this case, this first declaration corresponds, I got this down on paper in here. This one is a format for vector3, and its usage corresponds to position. This one right here corresponds to a vector2 and is the UV coordinates, and this one right here is a vector4 and corresponds to the color. But as I said, you can use any declaration for vertices that you want and it will work, even if you don't have colors. As long as, if you don't use colors, just say colors, vertex color enable false, and it will work without any problems. And well, the classic thing that any mesh has. And this right here, displacements map, is basically the texture that is used to make the displacement, which is the water normals. So I guess you could technically use absolutely any map you want, right? Any texture. So that's the reason why I'm thinking about either adding a editing panel within Blender in the ink and key panel. So for example, we come here and we got a force field, and we could have a list of options here to edit them. Or we could do like we do with materials, where we select the object, and in materials we put a specific name to it, right? And then we load up the corresponding file, because even though this is not the same as a material, if you think about it, it's very similar in a structure, right? Obviously we will have to make something weird where we'd have to put like displacement map, like only these properties, right? We'd have to and figure out what TTL does, because TTL is just the name that I obtained from the decompiled code. And I have no fucking clue what it does. So basically all of this stuff is unexplored territory, but it's pretty much 100% implemented right now. You can manually edit these things and try to play around with them to figure out what each of these things do. But in my opinion, I think that having these features hard-coded for now, it's 100% valid and normal, because they basically would look like the same as they do in the regular base game. So yeah, I don't see any problem with doing things like that. So for now, that's the most I have implemented about force fields. I'll keep researching to try to figure out what the actual wind pipes that push you are. They are probably actually physics entities or something else. I have no idea. Or maybe they are expounding through the XML files. We'll have to figure those out, right? But yeah, in any case, it's probably related to some spell caster type of entity under the hood. So we might have to do a little bit more digging to figure out how things work. But yeah, pretty productive day, I guess. Even though I didn't really implement the feature that I expected, it actually works nicely. Now, one extra thing I wanted to mention. If this one right here I modified to be able to make it work in my map during initial testing, because this is ripped from the RLI map from the Stars Are Left DLC from the base game, right? But I changed it because originally the string was this. Because this string right here is actually located in a path which is within another subfolder, right? And in my case, we are locating the files within the challenges folder directly, so we are literally one path less than this one right here. So that means that we need to change stuff around to actually be able to make a valid string for us to work with. Otherwise, we would have trouble actually finding the correct path. And actually, if we have this path right here, it crashes because it's not the real path relative to my level. So I'm thinking, I'm not sure if textures can be looked up with a global path, right? It would be great if they could be looked with at least a path relative to the content folder, like the XNA framework does. That way we would save ourselves from all of the possible troubles of having relative pathing being fucked up, right? Or maybe you could just pack a copy of your own textures within your own map folders to make sure that they are working correctly. In any case, it doesn't matter. The point is that you actually need to hard code the paths of your maps according to what folder you're going to put it in. So if in the future we figure out how to load maps located in any path, we're actually going to have to be very strict about how we install mods to be able to make them work correctly. So whenever you make a mod, you're going to be responsible of writing these paths manually actually. And right now the add-on is the one doing the automatic writing, because since I always put it in challenges, which is the only way to load maps for now, right? It basically goes one folder up and that's it. And that's okay for challenges and versus maps, but for anything like a campaign map, we would probably have to either cook our own folder for maps and, you know, just live with that from that point onward, or we would have to do manual patching on the JSON files, or we could always, you know, have a setting in the exporter saying, well, I'll have this many indentations, you know, going upwards from the folder to find textures, or something like that, right? Or we could just use absolute paths relative to content and look for things in there. So yeah, it's a lot of things that we need to think about. There's a lot of problems that we don't have yet, but we will come across those problems in the future. So yeah, it is what it is. We could also have maybe some config type of field in the texture JSON files where we could have something like an asset with contents and having a path specified in there. I don't know. We'll think about it. We'll figure it out. But for now, it's working, and I don't think we need to play around much more with it. So yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see each other in the next video when I actually get some more information and get down to implementing something else, because right now the tool is pretty much 100% done when it comes to basic functionalities. Like, it's all there. Every single type of component, I think, has been implemented, so that's cool, right? Yeah.